He was just a poor boy who gave directions to a lost stranger, never expecting to see her again. But 7 days later, she returned with a gift that changed his life forever. What could she possibly have done to repay his kindness? This is a story about a simple act of compassion and a stranger's extraordinary response. You will not believe how this encounter unfolded. 17-year-old Arman walked through the crowded city streets, his torn shoes barely holding together. Every step whispered of struggles too heavy for someone his age. He wasn't just carrying his weight. He was fighting for his sick younger sister, Sarah, and for a future that seemed impossibly far away. In a bustling square where the wealthy brushed past the poor without a glance, Arman stopped to adjust the small sack of bread on his shoulder. The city's pulse was loud, chaotic, but his focus was sharper than the noise around him. His late mother's words played in his mind, steadying him. Helping others is never weakness. Her voice was his guiding light, even in the darkest days. And then he saw her, a woman stepping out of a gleaming car that didn't belong in this part of town. She looked lost, desperate, her eyes red from crying. Arman hesitated, his burdens pulling at him, but something inside wouldn't let him walk away. "Excuse me," he said softly, approaching her. The woman looked startled but nodded quickly. "Do you need help finding something?" Her shaky voice revealed her gratitude. "Yes, please. I am looking for the hospital." Arman gave her clear, calm directions, and as he stepped back, her gaze lingered, a silent, unspoken connection. She drove away, but not without leaving a shadow of curiosity in Arman's heart. Why had she been crying? Why did her glance feel so heavy, so full of meaning? 7 days later, he would find out, and his life would never be the same. 17-year-old Arman sat beside his younger sister, Sarah, as her fever worsened. Her shallow breaths filled the tiny room, each one heavier than the last. The medicine she needed was out of reach, and time was slipping away. "Arman?" Sarah whispered faintly, her weak voice cutting through his thoughts. "Have you eaten today?" He forced a smile. "You just focus on getting better," he replied. But inside, his empty stomach churned, a reminder of his sacrifice. 2 days without food, yet nothing seemed to change. How much longer could he keep going? Outside, the city roared with life, indifferent to his struggle. Desperation weighed on his shoulders as he whispered, "What will I do now?" Little did Arman know, a moment was coming, one decision, that would turn his world upside down. Arman sat cross-legged on the cold, uneven floor, his gaze fixed on the cracked walls of the small one-room shack. The bulb above flickered weakly, casting fleeting shadows on the cluttered table that held a few pencils, torn notebooks, and unfinished schoolwork. He reached for a faded photo tucked carefully under the table's edge. It was the only picture he had of their parents. His mother's warm smile and his father's proud eyes felt like a distant memory, yet their absence shaped every corner of this suffocating room. Holding the photograph close to his chest, Arman whispered, "You always believed in me, but am I doing enough? Am I strong enough?" His voice quivered, barely audible over the hum of distant city noise leaking through the flimsy walls. Across the room, Sarah stirred in her sleep, her frail body curled under a thin, worn blanket. Arman's chest tightened as he looked at her pale face. He clenched his fists, his rough, calloused hands trembling as his mind replayed the nights he had skipped meals just to buy her medicine. A fleeting thought crossed his mind, one he did not dare to say out loud. What if I fail her too? The bulb flickered again, this time staying off for a moment longer, plunging the room into silence and dimness. But even in the dark, Arman's resolve burned bright. His whispers broke the stillness. "I will find a way, Sarah. I promise, I will not let this world break us." Arman stood in the corner of the dim pharmacy, clutching a few crumpled bills in his hand. His heart sank as he carefully recounted the money. 20, 30, 40. He knew it would not be enough. His fingers tightened around the worn-out notes as frustration and helplessness washed over him. "How much for the medicine?" he asked, his voice trembling with urgency. The pharmacist barely glanced at him. 200, came the cold reply. Arman's throat tightened. 200. It felt like an impossible mountain to climb. I only have 40. Can you please? His voice broke, the rest of his plea swallowed by the lump in his throat. The pharmacist shook his head firmly. I am sorry, but I cannot help you with that. Come back when you have enough. The words were as sharp as knives, cutting through Arman's already fragile hope. As he stepped outside into the bustling street, the world around him blurred. He clutched the money tightly, his knuckles white from the pressure. The thought of failing Sarah gnawed at his soul, leaving him paralyzed. A small voice in his head whispered, "You cannot give up. Not now, not ever." Arman stood motionless for a moment, then looked up at the sky. "I have to find a way," he murmured, his resolve slowly hardening. But deep inside, a question lingered. How far would he need to go to save the only family he had left? Arman stood under the vast, star-lit sky, the chill of the night wrapping around him like a heavy burden. His breath was shallow, his chest rising and falling as if the weight of the world pressed against him. He glanced upward, his eyes shimmering with unshed tears. If only someone would help, he whispered, his voice trembling as the wind carried his words into the darkness. If only I could be enough. His hands clenched into fists, the rough skin of his palms digging into his fingers. A faint shudder coursed through his body as despair and determination clashed within him. I have tried everything, he murmured, his voice cracking under the weight of his emotions. What more can I do? What else can I give? The silence around him offered no answers, only the faint rustling of leaves in the breeze. He tilted his head down, his shoulders hunched as a single tear rolled down his cheek. In the solitude of the moment, he let the raw truth of his struggle wash over him. But then, a faint glimmer of resolve sparked within him. He lifted his gaze to the stars once more. I will not give up. For her, I cannot stop fighting. His voice grew steadier, the tremble fading as determination took root. Though he stood alone, he made a silent vow to keep going, no matter what the cost. The battle was far from over, and the stars bore witness to his plea. Sophia stood by the floor-to-ceiling window of her luxurious penthouse, her gaze lost in the glittering city lights below. The hum of the metropolis seemed distant, muted by the weight of her thoughts. She held a glass in her hand, untouched, as her mind drifted back to the boy she had encountered just days ago. His face, so young yet worn by hardship, was etched into her memory. The kindness in his eyes, the quiet strength in his voice, it haunted her. She exhaled deeply, her chest tightening as guilt and curiosity swirled within her. How does someone so young bear so much? She whispered to herself, her voice heavy with emotion. She turned away from the window, her steps slow and uncertain. On the table lay a photo of her late son, his bright smile frozen in time. She picked it up, her fingers brushing the edges as tears welled up in her eyes. You would have seen yourself in him, she murmured softly, her voice cracking under the weight of her sorrow. The memory of Arman's unwavering resolve despite his struggles lingered, intertwining with her own grief. She clenched the photo to her chest and closed her eyes. I cannot forget him, she whispered to the still air. There is something about him, something I cannot ignore. In that moment, Sophia felt the stirrings of a decision forming within her, a need to act, though she was not yet sure how. Sophia sat alone in the soft glow of her penthouse, her gaze fixed on the photograph resting in her trembling hands. It was her family, whole, happy, and untouched by the fractures that time and choices had inflicted. The silence of the room pressed down on her, broken only by the faint hum of the city below. Her fingers traced the edges of the frame as her mind replayed memories she could not outrun. The boy's face, Arman's face, appeared in her thoughts again, piercing through her guarded walls. Why can I not forget him? She whispered, her voice trembling with an emotion she struggled to name. His resilience, his unspoken pain, mirrored the shadows she had carried for years. She set the photo down and leaned back, her chest heavy with the sorrow she had learned to conceal. Sophia turned her eyes back to the cityscape, but the bright lights only sharpened the darkness within. She thought of her son, the tragedy that had stolen him from her, and the estrangement that followed with the rest of her family. Her voice wavered as she muttered to herself, "I failed them. I failed him. But could helping this boy, could it mean something?" The idea lingered in her mind, a question she was too afraid to answer. As the night stretched on, Sophia's guilt and hope collided, leaving her with one haunting thought. Perhaps this was her second chance. Arman sat on the edge of his creaky bed, staring at the few worn-out books stacked beside him. His fingers grazed the spine of one, a reminder of the dreams he had once cherished. His eyes drifted toward the doorway, where faint coughing from Sarah's room reached him, pulling him back into the suffocating reality of their struggles. "How long can I keep this up?" he whispered to himself, his voice cracking under the weight of his thoughts. His mind raced with the same haunting question: would giving up his education finally solve their problems? Could he take on more work and still hope for a future? The very thought tightened his chest, filling him with a sense of defeat he fought so hard to conceal. He clenched his fists and looked at the only photo of their parents hanging on the wall. Their smiling faces seemed to mock him now. "I promised you I would take care of her," he murmured, his voice barely audible. "But what kind of brother am I if I let her down just to chase my own dreams?" The idea of sacrificing his schooling cut deeper than he expected. Yet, as the night grew quieter and the weight of responsibility grew heavier, Arman's resolve hardened. "I have no choice," he whispered, his voice trembling. "She comes first. She has to." Sophia stood by the window, gazing at the city lights shimmering below. The penthouse felt quieter than usual, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Her mind replayed the boy's face, Arman. His weary eyes carried the weight of a life far too heavy for someone so young. She clutched the edge of the windowsill, her thoughts racing. "That boy, I cannot just forget him," she whispered, her voice breaking the silence. The memory of his kindness cut through her heart, bringing with it an unexpected sense of guilt. She thought of her estranged family, the years of regret, and the emptiness left by her unresolved past. Could helping this boy somehow be her chance at redemption? Sophia sank into the armchair by the fireplace, the flickering flames casting shadows on her face. "What am I even trying to fix?" she murmured, her hand brushing a photo frame on the table. Inside, a smiling child stared back, a child who was no longer there. Her chest tightened as she set the frame down, her resolve faltering for a moment. But then, as if the boy's face spoke to her again, she straightened. "If I do nothing, I will regret it forever," she said, her voice trembling with determination. The thought of reaching out scared her. Yet, for the first time in years, she felt a faint flicker of hope. This is my second chance," she whispered, her decision now clear. Arman's head rested against the wooden frame of the fragile bed, his exhaustion finally overpowering his worries. His eyes fluttered shut, but the weight of his thoughts remained heavy. Beside him, Sarah's soft breathing filled the silence of the night, a reminder of the battle she fought, one he could not afford to lose. A loud knock shattered the stillness, jolting him awake. His heart raced as he sat up, his tired eyes darting toward the door. Who could it be at this hour? The question lingered as the knocks came again, firmer this time. Arman hesitated, glancing at Sarah before dragging himself toward the door. His hands trembled slightly as he unlatched it. Sophia stepped out of her car, the soft hum of the engine fading behind her. The air was cool, heavy with the scent of damp earth and shadows of poverty. Her heels clicked softly against the uneven path leading to the shack. Every step felt like a question. Was this the right thing to do? Her fingers hovered near the door for a moment before she finally knocked. The sound echoed into the quiet, merging with the low murmur of the distant city. She heard movement inside, a hesitant shuffle, and then the door creaked open. Arman's tired eyes met hers, filled with confusion and guarded hope. She offered a tentative smile. I think we need to talk," Sophia said, her voice trembling with sincerity. Arman studied her for a moment before stepping aside, though he could not understand her reasons. Something about her presence carried a glimmer of promise, a hope he was too afraid to believe in. Neither of them knew it yet, but this was the beginning of a story that would change everything. Arman clutched the crumpled bills in his hand, his knuckles whitening with tension. He stood at the pharmacist's counter, his voice trembling as he pleaded, "Please, I need this medicine for my sister. She is very sick. Can you give me a discount? Anything, please." The pharmacist barely glanced at him, his expression cold and unmoved. "We are not running a charity here," he replied sharply. "If you do not have enough money, there is nothing I can do." Arman's pride felt like it had been shattered into pieces, scattered across the floor for everyone to see. His lips quivered as he opened his palm, revealing every coin and note he had managed to scrape together. "This is all I have," he whispered, his desperation breaking through the heavy silence of the shop. The pharmacist sighed impatiently. "It is not enough. I cannot help you." Arman swallowed the lump in his throat, his face burning with humiliation as other customers turned to watch. His heart ached, but his love for Sarah gave him the strength to endure. He picked up his money, each coin feeling like a betrayal of the life he wanted to give his sister. Walking away, Arman's gaze fell to the ground, but his mind screamed a single question: what choice do I have left? For 2 days, Arman skipped meals. Each time hunger gnawed at his stomach, he clutched his pocket, feeling the weight of the coins he had saved. It was not enough to satisfy his hunger, but it was enough to keep him going. On the second night, he handed over the money at the same pharmacy, this time without a single word. The pharmacist silently placed the medicine on the counter. Arman grabbed it and ran home, his legs trembling from exhaustion and relief. Sarah's face lit up as he handed her the medicine. "You got it," she said weakly, her voice filled with a mixture of disbelief and gratitude. Arman smiled, though his body was screaming with fatigue. The ache in his stomach was nothing compared to the joy of seeing Sarah's hopeful eyes. For the first time in days, he allowed himself to breathe. The clinking coins in his pocket were gone, replaced by something far heavier, the quiet hope that his sacrifices might just be enough to keep Sarah's smile alive. Sophia paced the length of her penthouse, her reflection flickering against the glass as the city lights illuminated her restless figure. Arman's face lingered in her mind, etched with quiet resilience. How could someone with so little give so much? She whispered to herself, her voice heavy with disbelief. Every moment of their brief encounter replayed in her mind. His trembling voice, his calm demeanor amidst chaos, and the undeniable strength in his weary eyes. Sophia clenched her hands as guilt clawed at her. "Why can I not let it go?" she murmured, staring into the night sky. She thought of the comfort surrounding her, the extravagant paintings, the designer furniture, and the city that stretched endlessly before her. Yet, none of it could silence the question that gnawed at her soul. How had she been blind to the weight carried by others all her life? Her heart sank deeper as she recalled the stories her grandmother used to tell her about sacrifice and gratitude. "That boy," she said aloud, her voice trembling. "He has given me something I never asked for, a mirror to my selfishness." Could helping him really ease the guilt that haunted her nights? Sophia did not know the answer, but the thought of doing nothing felt unbearable. She resolved, with a sharp intake of breath, to find him. Whatever it took, she needed to understand why someone like him could teach her what she had spent a lifetime avoiding. The following morning, Sophia stood in the bustling streets where she had met Arman, her heels clicking against the pavement as she approached a vendor. "Excuse me," she began hesitantly. "Do you know a boy who helps around here?" "Young kind. I think his name might be Arman." The vendor looked at her with a curious smile. "Oh, the boy with the sick sister? He is always helping someone. Works harder than anyone I know." Sophia's chest tightened. She moved to another stall, her questions becoming more urgent with each answer she received. "Armand?" a woman repeated, balancing a basket on her hip. "That boy, he is a gem, always running errands for others, even when he has nothing for himself." "Why do you ask?" Each story painted a picture of resilience that humbled Sophia further. A child who carried burdens no one should endure, who smiled despite his pain, who gave even when he had nothing. She felt her determination grow. But where is he now? Sophia whispered to herself, scanning the crowded streets as if he might suddenly appear. Every step she took deepened her conviction. Arman was not just a boy with a kind heart. He was the reminder she needed, a piece of hope in a world she had long viewed with indifference. As the sun began to set, her search felt endless, but the glimmer of possibility refused to fade. Something told her she was closer than she realized. Sophia approached the small shop in the bustling market, her heart heavy with questions. The shopkeeper, an elderly man with a warm smile, leaned forward as she mentioned Arman's name. "Ah, that boy," he said, shaking his head slowly. "He is one of a kind. Works harder than anyone I know, but refuses to ask for help." "Why?" Sophia's voice was soft, almost pleading. The shopkeeper sighed, his eyes clouded with a mix of admiration and sorrow. "Pride, my dear. He has nothing, yet he gives everything. But to accept help? That is a burden he cannot bear." Sophia felt a pang in her chest, as if the man's words reflected something within herself. "What do you mean by everything?" The shopkeeper gestured toward the narrow street. "He works day and night to care for his sister, skips his own meals, does not rest. I have seen him collapse from exhaustion, yet he keeps going." Sophia's resolve deepened as she left the shop. Arman's struggles mirrored her own inner turmoil, both fighting battles invisible to the world. But she realized her search was no longer just about Arman. "I am looking for something more," she whispered to herself, her voice trembling. "Perhaps answers to my own pain." Her footsteps quickened as determination replaced hesitation. She needed to find him, not to save him, but to find the part of herself that his story had awakened. Days turned into restless searches, but Sophia's determination did not waver. Finally, she arrived at a construction site, drawn by a vague tip. Her breath caught as she saw him, his small frame struggling under the weight of heavy cement bags. Arman's face was flushed, his thin arms trembling, yet his resolve was unshaken. Sophia hesitated, her heart pounding. She had imagined this moment countless times, but now standing there, she felt the gravity of his reality. She stepped forward, calling softly, "Arman." He froze, the bag slipping slightly from his grip. Turning slowly, his wary eyes met hers. "You," he said cautiously, wiping the sweat from his brow. "What are you doing here?" Sophia swallowed hard, unsure of how to begin. "I had to find you. I could not forget." Arman shifted uncomfortably, his pride shielding him like armor. "Why would someone like you care about someone like me?" His voice was steady, but the question held a weight that silenced her. "I do not know," she admitted, her voice breaking. "Maybe because I see in you what I have lost in myself. Hope, strength, purpose." Arman lowered his gaze, his grip tightening on the bag. "I do not need your pity," he said firmly. "It is not pity," she replied, stepping closer. "It is admiration, and maybe guilt. Please let me help." Arman hesitated, the conflict in his eyes visible. Why would a wealthy woman like her care about a boy like him? That question lingered between them, unanswered as the wind carried away their words, leaving only silence. Sophia stood before Arman, her words carefully measured. "Arman, let me help you. Please take this. It is not charity. It is what you deserve." Arman's gaze hardened, his pride surfacing in his tired but resolute voice. "If I have not earned it, I cannot accept it. That is not how I was raised." Sophia's hand trembled as she held out the money. "This is not about pride, Arman. This is about survival, about Sarah." His eyes softened at the mention of his sister, but his stance remained firm. "What good is survival if I lose who I am? My dignity is all I have left. Without it, I am nothing." His words hit Sophia like a mirror reflecting her own failures. She felt her resolve waver, questioning how she could bridge the chasm between them. "But you cannot do this alone. No one can." Arman shook his head, his voice steady. "I have no choice. I will not let anyone look at me and think I took what I did not earn, not even you." Sophia's heart ached as he walked away, leaving her standing in silence. How could she help him without breaking his spirit? That question lingered unanswered as she turned toward her car, her determination to find another way growing stronger with every step. Inside her car, Sophia gripped the steering wheel, her thoughts racing. Arman's integrity was both admirable and infuriating. He is too proud, she whispered to herself, tears brimming in her eyes. But how can I help him without taking that pride away? The rain began to patter against the windshield, mirroring the storm inside her heart. Her mind wandered back to her own past, to the family she had pushed away, to the decisions she could never take back. Maybe this is my chance, she murmured, her voice trembling. Maybe helping him is the only way to make peace with my own failures. She thought of Arman's worn hands, his exhausted frame, and the relentless determination that shone through his every action. Her chest tightened as she imagined his struggles, so raw and unyielding. A plan began to form in her mind, one that would allow her to help without wounding his pride. She would find a way, something subtle, something that would give him what he needed without making him feel lesser. The weight of her own regrets bore down on her as she whispered, "What if this is my last chance to find peace?" Sophia stared out into the rain, her silent resolve hardening into action. She would not fail him, not when helping him might be her only way to save herself. The road ahead was uncertain, but she knew one thing for sure: she would not turn back now. Sarah's frail voice trembled as she looked up at her brother. "You are doing too much, Arman. Please rest." Arman knelt beside her, brushing her hair back gently. "Do not worry about me. You just focus on getting better," he said, his tone steady, though his eyes betrayed the weight he carried. She reached for his hand, her grip weak but filled with determination. "I can see it, Arman. You are tired. You do not need to hide it from me." He smiled, but the effort of holding back his own fears was evident. "What kind of brother would I be if I let you see me falter? You are my strength, Sarah. I cannot stop now." Her eyes filled with tears, the unspoken worry hanging heavy in the air. "But how long can you keep going like this?" Arman did not answer. Instead, he kissed her forehead and whispered, "As long as it takes." Inside, the question lingered. How much longer could he endure the exhaustion, the endless battle to keep them afloat? Sophia sat in her study, the dim light casting shadows across her face. Arman's refusal echoed in her mind. "If I have not earned it, I cannot take it." Her heart ached as she recalled the pride in his voice. "How do I help someone who does not want to be helped?" she murmured. Her thoughts drifted to her own regrets, the family she had alienated, the bridges she had burned. "Maybe this is not just about him," she whispered. "Maybe this is about finding a way to heal myself too." Suddenly, an idea sparked. She grabbed a notebook, jotting down her plan. "A job," she said aloud. "Something that lets him earn what he needs without feeling like he is taking charity." Her pen paused as doubt crept in. "But will he trust me? Can I reach him before it is too late?" Sophia closed her eyes, envisioning Arman's determined face and Sarah's fragile frame. The weight of their struggles fueled her resolve. "This is my chance to make things right, for them and for myself." She exhaled deeply, her path clear but uncertain. As she folded the notebook shut, a single thought lingered. What if this plan changed everything, for both of them? Sophia leaned forward, her voice calm yet firm. "Arman, I want to offer you a job. My company needs a delivery assistant, and I think you would be perfect for the role." Arman's eyes widened. "Why me? You barely know me." She smiled gently. "Because I see someone who works hard, someone who does not give up even when things seem impossible. It is not charity. It is an opportunity to earn what you need." His fists clenched as he looked away. I do not know. I have never worked for anyone like you before." Sophia's voice softened. "Think about Sarah. This could help you both without compromising your pride." The mention of his sister made his shoulders slump. His pride fought with the desperation clawing at him, but finally he nodded. "I will take the job, but I will earn every penny." Sophia smiled, her heart lighter. I would not expect anything less from you." As Arman walked away, he glanced back, a mix of gratitude and suspicion in his eyes. Little did he know this job was about to unravel a connection deeper than he could imagine. Arman's first day began with quiet determination. He greeted everyone with respect, his humility earning him subtle nods of approval from colleagues. Sophia watched from her office window as Arman loaded packages, his movements deliberate despite his exhaustion. "He is remarkable," she thought, her respect for him deepening. One of the workers muttered under his breath, "Let us see how long he lasts." But by midday, Arman had already outpaced them all. At lunch, Sophia approached him. "How is it going so far?" Arman wiped his forehead and stood straight. "Hard work is nothing new to me. Each package delivered feels like a step closer to what I need." Her admiration grew, but she noticed the whispers among the other workers. Not everyone was happy to see Arman succeed. As the day ended, Arman walked home, his body weary but his spirit unbroken. However, the shadows of envy loomed, hinting at challenges ahead. Sophia's voice trembled as she began, "Arman, there's something I need to tell you." He looked up from the task at hand, sensing the weight in her tone. "What is it?" She took a deep breath, her eyes distant. "Years ago, I lost my only son in a car accident. He was young, full of life, and gone in an instant. I thought I would never find peace again." Arman's brows furrowed, unsure of what to say. Sophia continued, her voice breaking. "When I saw you, the way you care for your sister, your determination despite everything, it reminded me of him, of who he could have been if he had grown up." Arman swallowed hard, his own emotions threatening to surface. I do not know what to say. I am just trying to keep going." Tears welled in Sophia's eyes. "You are doing more than just surviving, Arman. You are inspiring. You show me that kindness still exists, even in the hardest of times." His voice cracked as he whispered, "No one has ever shown me this much kindness before." They sat in silence for a moment, two lives bound by shared pain and unexpected connection. But was this newfound bond strong enough to survive the test ahead? The sound of a raised voice broke the quiet rhythm of the day. "Stop right there," a co-worker shouted, pointing at Arman. Confused, Arman froze. "What is going on?" The man stormed forward, holding up a small item. "This was found in your delivery bag, stolen from the last shipment." Arman's heart sank. That is not mine. I did not take anything." The other workers gathered, their whispers like daggers. Sophia arrived, her expression sharp. "What is happening here?" The accuser stepped forward confidently. "He stole from the company. I saw it with my own eyes." Arman's voice shook. "I swear I did not do this. Someone must have planted it." Sophia's eyes narrowed, searching for the truth. "Arman, do you have any idea how this could have happened?" His fists clenched, but his voice remained calm. "I would never risk my job. I would never risk Sarah's future." The tension in the room was suffocating, the co-workers divided between suspicion and pity. Sophia's tone turned steely. "I will investigate this thoroughly. But know this, if you are lying, there will be consequences." As Arman stood there, his world threatened to collapse. Was this the end of his fragile new beginning, or could he prove his innocence before it was too late? The room was tense, every eye fixed on Sophia as she held up a USB drive. "Before anyone makes assumptions, I reviewed the surveillance footage," she said firmly, her voice cutting through the whispers. The accuser's smug grin faltered. "What does that prove?" he stammered. Sophia's gaze was unwavering. "It proves that Arman is innocent. The footage clearly shows you placing the item in his delivery bag." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Arman stood frozen, disbelief and relief battling in his expression. You believe me," he whispered. Sophia stepped closer, her voice soft but resolute. "I trust you, Arman, because I see who you really are. Your integrity, your kindness, they cannot be faked." The accuser stammered, I only." Sophia raised her hand, silencing him. There is no excuse for trying to destroy someone's reputation out of jealousy. You will face the consequences of your actions. Tears welled in Arman's eyes as the weight of the moment sank in. "Thank you," he managed, his voice trembling. Sophia placed a hand on his shoulder, her expression gentle. "This is not just about trust. It is about standing up for what is right." But as the crowd dispersed, Arman wondered, what had Sophia seen in him that gave her such unshakable faith? The air was heavy with unspoken words as Arman and Sophia shared a quiet moment. "I never expected someone to fight for me like that," Arman admitted, his voice low. Sophia smiled, her eyes soft with understanding. "Sometimes life surprises us. Your resilience reminds me of what I lost, but also of what I can still give." Arman looked away, struggling to hold back tears. "You have given me hope when I thought I had none." Sophia's voice was steady, filled with quiet strength. Sometimes the most broken hearts find solace in the unlikeliest of connections. In that moment, they both realized something profound. Their shared pain had forged a bond stronger than words, a connection born from trials and the courage to endure them. Under Sophia's guidance, Arman worked with a focus and determination that left everyone in awe. Every task he undertook reflected his desire to prove himself. His once timid demeanor now carried a quiet confidence. "You handled that delivery flawlessly," Sophia remarked one afternoon, her tone filled with pride. Arman looked up, his face flushed with effort. "I just do not want to disappoint you." Sophia smiled gently. "You are not just meeting expectations, Arman. You are exceeding them." Colleagues began to notice his transformation. Whispers of admiration floated around him. "Did you see how he managed that order?" One said. "He is like a completely different person now," added another. Arman's transformation symbolized hope. He no longer hesitated to take on new responsibilities. Each delivery, each completed task, felt like a step closer to the future he longed for, but dared not yet believe in. But as he looked at his reflection in the company's glass doors, he could not help but wonder, could he truly leave his past behind? For weeks, Arman saved every penny of his earnings, refusing even the smallest indulgence. The day he finally brought Sarah to the clinic, his heart raced with a mix of fear and hope. "Will this make me better, Arman?" Sarah asked softly, her frail voice filled with cautious optimism. "It will," he promised, his voice steady despite the lump in his throat. Days turned into weeks, and Sarah's health began to improve. The color returned to her cheeks, and her laughter, something Arman had almost forgotten, filled their small home once more. One evening, he handed her a school bag. "It is time for you to go to school, Sarah, to learn, to dream." Her eyes widened with joy. "You mean I can really go?" "Yes," Arman replied, his voice thick with emotion. "You deserve every chance I never had." As Sarah hugged him tightly, her laughter echoing in the room, Arman realized something profound. For all his struggles, this was the reward he had been fighting for. And in that moment, he allowed himself to dream, not just for her, but for them both. Sophia sat in her office, a photo of her son resting in her hands. His smile, frozen in time, seemed to urge her forward. She whispered softly, "I hope you see this, my love. Every step I take is for you." Establishing the foundation in her son's name had given her life a renewed sense of purpose. She met with families, heard their stories, and offered them the support they desperately needed. Each act of kindness felt like a message to her son, a promise to keep his legacy alive. During a meeting with Arman, she shared a memory that had long weighed on her heart. "My son was about your age when I lost him," she began, her voice trembling. Arman looked at her with wide eyes, unsure how to respond. Sophia continued, "Helping you, seeing your determination, it feels like I am honoring him in some way. You remind me of his strength." Arman, overwhelmed, could only manage a whisper. "No one has ever believed in me the way you do." But Sophia's work with Arman was far from over. In her heart, she knew the next step she would take would forever change his life. On the morning of Arman's 18th birthday, he arrived at Sophia's office, confused by the urgency in her message. As he entered, he saw a small table adorned with a cake and a simple banner. "Happy birthday, Arman," Sophia said warmly. Arman's eyes widened. "You remembered?" "Of course," she replied. Then, with a deep breath, she added, "There is something else. I want to fund your education, Arman, and I would like you to take a permanent role in this company." Arman froze, unable to process her words. "Education? A permanent job?" Sophia nodded. "You have earned this, Arman, and I know you will do great things." Tears streamed down his face as he choked out, "I will make you proud. I will pay this forward, just like you taught me." In that moment, their bond grew stronger, cemented by hope and shared dreams. For both of them, it was not just a new chapter, it was a promise of brighter tomorrows. Arman stood at the entrance of Sophia's foundation, watching children eagerly line up for their meals. His chest tightened with a sense of purpose he had never known before. He turned to Sophia, his voice steady yet filled with emotion. "I want to help them, just like you helped me. It is my turn now." Sophia's eyes softened as she placed a hand on his shoulder. "I always knew you would find your way here," she said gently. Days turned into weeks, and Arman became a familiar figure at the foundation. He taught children how to read, encouraged them to dream, and reminded them that their circumstances did not define their futures. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, a young boy tugged at his sleeve. "Do you think I can be like you someday?" the boy asked, his eyes wide with hope. Arman knelt, looking him in the eye. "You can be better than me. Always believe in yourself, no matter how hard it gets." He reflected on his journey, every challenge, every moment of despair, and realized that this was his purpose. He had been given a second chance, and now he would be the beacon of hope for others. Word of Arman's efforts spread quickly. Local businesses began donating supplies, volunteers arrived in droves, and the community united like never before. Sophia watched the transformation with pride, her voice filled with warmth as she told Arman, "Your story is changing lives, one act of kindness at a time." Arman, humbled, replied, "It all started with you, Sophia. You believed in me when no one else did." At a community event, an elderly man stepped forward. "Your determination inspired me to reopen my workshop," he said. "Now I am teaching young people the skills they need to stand on their own feet." Arman smiled, realizing how far the ripple of his journey had spread. What began as a chance encounter had blossomed into a movement of compassion and change. As he addressed the crowd that evening, his voice carried a quiet strength. No act of kindness is too small. It has the power to transform lives, including your own. In that moment, he understood that his story was not just about him. It was a testament to the profound impact of a single selfless gesture. This story of Arman and Sophia shows how kindness transforms lives. If it touched your heart, like, share, and comment. Remember, even small acts of kindness can create lasting change.